Okay, so here we are with another Masters of the Universe Masterverse unboxing, and this is He-Man, not just any He-Man. This is Dolph Lundgren as He-Man from the Masters of the Universe movie. Lovely piece of artwork on the back. Uh, He-Man didn't actually wear a cape in this scene, and also didn't wear his battle harness. This was where, at the end of the movie, he was being whipped by Blade and with the laser whip. Remember that? And so he was just kind of like shirtless and bruised and bleeding, and got the sword back and was like, "I have the power," and like that whole thing. It was really cool. I really liked that part in the movie. The movie is kind of, I think, controversial for a lot of different reasons. I think most kids at the time were kind of disappointed that it wasn't more like the cartoon show. But I had the mini comics before I ever saw the cartoon. So the cartoon, while I enjoyed it, it didn't really define Masters of the Universe to me the same way it did to kids who were younger than me and or came to the franchise later. Since I had the mini comics beforehand, that was kind of my definitive He-Man as far as that goes. There's no bio on the back, just the piece of artwork. I got this at Big Bad Toy Store. Look, there he is in front of Castle Grayskull on that side. That's nice. Over here it just says He-Man. Doesn't say anything specifically about what He-Man he is. So I'm wondering if there's some kind of rights issue as far as that goes. I had something I was going to say, and then I just kind of trailed off onto something else. I got this at Big Bad Toy Store. That's what it was. And I believe that it was a restock. So I pre-ordered the restock, and finally got it here recently. I had pre-ordered this one, and then I saw the other figure that I got at the same time as this one, which will probably be the next thing that I unbox, which is Battle Armor Skeletor. I did not see if they had restocked the movie version of Skeletor. If they had, I hadn't seen it, but we've seen this Masterverse packaging before. But yeah, it doesn't even say like Masters Universe movie or have the movie logo on there. That's the same logo that they use on the the Netflix type packaging, I think, and not too dissimilar from what they have on the new Eternia stuff. So yeah, I think there might be some kind of rights issue. So that might explain something else with this figure that we'll get into that when we get into that. But I do know that there was some bad blood between whoever actually holds the rights to this movie and Mattel. So they didn't want to let Mattel do movie figures at all at some point. They taped the cape to the package, and I hate that because now there's going to be residue on the cape. There's one thing that I find annoying about the soft goods on the Masterverse figures. That would be the thing. Because eventually there's just going to be kind of a dark spot on this cape at either corner where it got taped up. So he's got a number of accessories. Let's go ahead and get those out of there first. But yeah, they did some movie figures for Masters of the Universe Classics. And I think, I could be mistaken about this, but I think the way they got away with that was that that they weren't really figures based on the movie. They were movies based on Brian Froud's artwork. I think it was Brian Froud. Was it Brian Froud? I think it was. That was designed for the movie. Solid fist and a gripping hand. So the fist is for the right hand, and the gripping hand is for the left hand. And the hands that the figures has as default is he has an open hand on the left hand and a gripping hand on the right hand. So yeah. So technically, I think the movie figures for the classics weren't really based on the movie. They were supposedly based on the production art, which I don't know how you get away with that either, honestly. But I was never able to get those plastics figures, unfortunately. They came out at a time in my life where I just wasn't in a position to be buying expensive action figures. You know, we all go through those periods where, like, it's maybe a little more lean. All right, so let me get him out of here. And there are some rubber tabs, which I neglected to cut, but whatever. This is deep enough into the package. It's probably a good thing I kind of accidentally turned this tray inside out. And doesn't seem to be one around the torso. I'm going to try to get the cape through here with as little damage as possible. There we go. Because it's just through like a thin little slit in the back. And then he's got rubber tabs around the ankles, but I was able to pull both of them off rather easily, actually. I didn't have to cut them. All right, cool. So, the other accessories he came with, which I don't think I mentioned, is Sword of Power, or as they call it in the movie, the Sword of Grayskull. Of course, since we all know now that the Sword of Power was originally wielded by King Grayskull, the Sword of Grayskull is a proper name for it, I guess. But you can see the design of the sword in the movie was slightly different. The director of the movie had gotten the gig because he was also the director of the Conan the Barbarian stage show that they had at Universal Studios for a while. And you can see some of the Conan influence in this sword. It looks a lot like the sword that he finds in the Crom. That whole bit looks a lot like that sword. And in the movie, doesn't appear to be on the toy, unfortunately. In the movie, it does have those kind of like hieroglyphic type things, ancient lettering etched into the blade, which I thought was really cool. But you can see how do I have a sword around here? I think I left Adam over on the desk. I know I had that Sword of Power, but if you're familiar with the design of the Sword of Power from the original toy and from the Filmation cartoon, you can see that there's elements of it in there. They just these are the little hand grips that would be on the side of the sword, the hand guards that, like I've pointed out before, in the original concept, when they designed the sword, it was supposed to be a key for Castle Grayskull, so that's why you had those hand grips on the side so they could turn it in the lock. The characters could, you could pretend the characters are turning in the lock. And you can see that they're on here very subtly, but you can see that they're here at the side. It looks very much like the design of the Filmation one. But like I said, this is a little more like a Conan type sword than it is like a He-Man type sword. I think certain changes were made to it to just make it better proportioned for a person to wield as an actual sword. You don't have to think about that kind of stuff too much when you're just designing a figure, like a weapon for a figure to hold, as opposed to a stuntman's actually going to have to spin this thing around and make it look like he's killing somebody with it. Well, not killing somebody, because we don't want He-Man to kill anybody in this movie, so we have to make him fight robots. At least until Mattel found themselves kind of in like some financial trouble and was like, oh yeah, have them kill people, all the sex and violence you want to have. So these shoulder joints seem a little stiff. I'm going to try to get them into more of a neutral position so I can start to talk about this. And then the other accessories that he has is he has this blaster, which He-Man usually did not come with a blaster as a default weapon in the vintage line. Although He-Man could wield blasters that came with the Castle Grayskull playset. There was a blaster rifle and a blaster pistol. And I suppose you could pretend this is the one that he found in Castle Grayskull. Two of these knives, which I remember him throwing at the bad guys in the movie, and this one's a little more plain. And this one's got a little more of that sort of power Zord design to the handguard. So that's kind of neat. So let's go ahead and set that aside. And then we have an extra head, which is a toy style He-Man head. So it's got the kind of page boy haircut you're used to He-Man having. It's glued on there. I was kind of hoping maybe like the hair pieces would be removable and you could swap the hair pieces between the two figures. Just put whichever one you wanted to on there. There's an articulation on this knife sheath, so that's kind of cool. And also, there's another knife sheath on the boot, so that's a nice little homage, throwback to the original design of He-Man, where he had that knife in the boot. I don't know if the filmmakers did that on purpose, but it is kind of cool. So the power sword looking knife, it looks like that one's the one that goes in the boot, and the smaller knife goes in this sheath on his hip. I think that's how it goes. But that's definitely a tight fit with that one. And then the blaster should go right into this holster on his hip. There we go. So that's what that looks like. And the holster, I suppose I should have probably had him holding the blaster first. So the movie was a little more sci-fi oriented than the toy line was. And the toy line always had sci-fi elements to it. But I think with the movie, they were going for like a little bit more of a Star Wars kind of feel. And if you give He-Man a blaster, he can get into gunfights and stuff like that. So for anybody who's uncomfortable with the idea of He-Man having a blaster, remember that in this storyline, Skeletor actually has conquered Eternia with the cosmic key, broken into Castle Grayskull, and is causing all kinds of havoc. So that's probably why He-Man has a blaster, because they're like literally at war at that point. A revolutionary civil war, basically, where He-Man is leading a rebel force. So that's kind of makes sense. So there's a lot of really good detail to like the sculpt of this figure, and it looks accurate to what we see in the movie. To me, there's this cool dragon that He-Man has sculpted into the breastplate there, rather than the Iron Cross, and a lot of good detailing to the armor. He's got the traditional He-Man harness, the X across the chest. If we look at the Origins figure, which I happen to have nearby, you can see how like they hit all the high points of He-Man. He doesn't have the furry shorts. That's kind of the one thing that I think is lacking. I think if they'd given him more of like a furry loincloth, maybe that would have helped kids, identify him more with the original He-Man. And Conan was like still a pretty popular character at that time, so I don't think it would have been too unusual for the mainstream movie-going audiences. The colors are really good. It's like a dark bronze for the gold pieces, with like a little bit of a wash over them to bring out some of those details. He's got burgundy shorts, and like I said, they're not furry. They're just kind of like spandex superhero type shorts that he has. And he's got the belt over them, which appears to not be removable. It looks like it's actually glued onto the figure. I do wish that it had have been removable. That would have been nice. It does look like you can remove the harness from the chest, so that's good. I'll go ahead and do that. Pop his head off so I can get that off a little bit easier. And he's got like the kind of standard Masterverse body underneath. So you can somewhat reenact the scene that I was talking about at the end of the movie, where he's being whipped and then breaks free, and he runs around pretty much shirtless like this at the end of the movie. And I don't think he had the gun belt on him, so that's probably something that, again, I think it would have been better if this was removable, the gun belt, and then you could have reenacted that. I'm sure some customizer somewhere has already done a version where like they put the whip marks onto his back. So anyway, we'll go ahead and put that stuff back on him. Just wanted to get a look at that. And you can take this stuff off, I think, without removing the head. It just seemed to me like it would be easier to do that way. So you can see that this is how it attaches on. Is there's buckle at the back. So you just like peg in a hole, goes over there. The peg's a little extra long, so then you can put the hole in the sword sheath, goes over that. Now the sword sheath is looks to me fairly close to how they did it in the movie, where it's got like a little loop at the top and then like a shorter sheath down at the bottom. Oh, something I should have thought about while I was doing this. Is the cape removable? And it looks like the cape is not removable. It looks like the cape is supposed to be on there permanently. And that's a shame also. It would have been nice if they'd have figured out a way to make this cape removable. Since he doesn't always wear the cape in the movie, there's some scenes where he's not wearing a cape. So it would have been nice to have more display options, shall we say. But if you're able to get an extra one of these, you can always just take the cape off of that one and maybe like take the belt off of it, even though like I said, it's supposed to be on there permanently. I think you could remove it. You might have to like get some glue off of there afterwards or whatever. Hopefully there's no peg holes or anything holding it up. So there's what this sword looks like in the sheath. Pretty cool. And you can see the sheath goes under the cape again, just like in the movie. So that's pretty neat. I'm going to go ahead and put the blaster in the holster. And it's probably going to stay there for a while because I don't really foresee using the blaster too much. Even though he uses the blaster a good bit in the movie, to me, it's still like, it's not the most He-Man of weapons. So I don't mind it, but let's go ahead and see what it looks like holding the knives. So there he is with the more plain sort of knife. You throw that at a bad guy. And like I said, there's a little bit of an articulation there, so that's nice. There's also, I don't think I pointed this out, a little bit of an articulation here, but there's not a whole lot you can do with the articulation on the sword sheath. And the pistol holster is kind of glued on there pretty solid. He does have the one wrist guard like he had in the movie, and I think that was kind of inspired by, well, this He-Man just has like two plain wristbands. I know I have one that has I'm pretty sure I have one. Isn't they do one where it's just like the original toy? I don't remember. Maybe I'm wrong. There's a dragon on his belt buckle too. There's all kinds of cool details on this armor. So one thing that I'm disappointed with on this figure, it is neat that you can store all the gear on him and everything. So that's really cool. But one thing I'm disappointed on is this is not a very good likeness of Dolph Lundgren. And in fact, it looks almost like somebody tried to do a sculpt of the face of the original He-Man figure. Like this one's obviously based on the original He-Man figure, but it looks like if somebody tried to do a sculpt of that face, but with a more neutral expression. And I'm thinking, again, it might be those rights issues. There might be some kind of rights issue. Maybe they weren't able to get, like, specifically Dolph Lundgren's likeness for this figure. So it does not look much like Dolph Lundgren at all. So that is a little disappointing. I would have rather had a figure that looked more like Dolph Lundgren. But hey, I've got, like, 3D print files of a Dolph Lundgren He-Man head. So I can print off another one and pop it on there. So I don't really have a problem as far as that goes. But not everybody has that luxury. Or I suppose you could try to get an Ivan Drago from Rocky IV, an action figure of him. It's pretty much in the same sort of scale. Put that head on here and just kind of peel the mullet hair off and try to get it to fit onto the Ivan Drago head. So then you can have a little bit more of an accurate Dolph Lundgren, proper Dolph Lundgren He-Man. So let's get a shot of him with the Sword of Power in his hands, since we haven't really gotten that. The Sword of Grayskull. So, and he does have a wrist articulation where he can hold it aloft. I have the power! I did love this movie. Like, it's one of those movies where it's like, you see it as a kid, and you love it, and you see it again as an adult, and the flaws become a bit more apparent, but you still love it, because, like, like for me at least, I'm able to turn off the adult portion of my brain and just watch it through the eyes of my childhood self, and I still really enjoy it. There's a lot to genuinely enjoy in this movie anyway. Like, I really do hope I can find that Skeletor figure at some point, because my favorite part of the movie is easily Frank Langella as Skeletor. Frank Langella is just such a great actor, like in general, and he's having a blast playing Skeletor. To this day, Frank Langella says that Skeletor is one of his favorite parts that he ever played, and he mainly took that part because his kids loved He-Man. Like his son at the time loved He-Man and was like a really big fan. So he'd play He-Man with his son. So he was familiar with the characters and everything, and he was like, "Yeah, hell yeah, I'll be Skeletor," and he loved playing Skeletor. So, like I said, I'm a big fan of his just because he's a great actor in general, but also because I'm a big fan of Dracula, and he was an awesome Dracula too. Dolph Lundgren, of course, had just gotten his start doing movies. He'd had like a bit part in the James Bond movie A View to a Kill. Grace Jones was in that, and Grace Jones was his girlfriend at the time, so she was able to get him like a little bit part in the movie as one of the henchmen. So that was his first film role, very brief appearance, and of course, then he was in Rocky IV, where he played Ivan Drago, and I think it was that got the attention of the filmmakers, and they were like, "Hey, we should get this guy for He-Man because he's a lot cheaper than Arnold Schwarzenegger." I don't think Arnold was too happy with He-Man anyway. There's stories of like Arnold being at Toy Fair and seeing the He-Man booth and kind of turning his nose up at it because they were there was the lawsuit going on where like the filmmakers behind Conan were suing Mattel for uh you know it's complicated to get into, but they were suing Mattel because of He-Man. So you can find details about it online. But yeah, let's go ahead and talk about the articulation on this guy. We haven't done that yet. And I've done several unboxings of these multiverse Masterverse figures, so I think everybody that's watched my videos should be familiar with the articulation by this point. But we're going to go ahead and talk about it anyway, because we might as well. This might be somebody's first video watching on this channel, so I want to make sure that they get to watch it. So He-Man can only look up about that far, so not much far up at all. He's still basically looking straight ahead. It's the mullet. The mullet is causing the problem. So He-Man can look down about that far. The head can rotate all the way around. He can rotate his arms all the way around at the shoulders. Oh, he can kind of tilt it physically side to side a little bit. He does have a bicep swivel, so the bicep rotates all the way around. He does have double jointed elbows, which bend about that far. As I pointed out, he does have a vertical hinge on his wrist, so his wrist moves up and down that way. Rotate the wrist all the way around. This wrist has a horizontal hinge, so it moves back and forth that way. And it looks like both the other alternate hands have horizontal hinges. Only the right gripping hand has the vertical hinge for the held aloft the magic sword kind of pose. He does have an articulation at the mid torso. It's mostly hidden by the harness, but you can move him around a bit at the mid torso. He rotates all the way around at the waist. Legs can kick up about that far. He's got double jointed knees, which are kind of stiff. Don't force your joints, though. That's a good way to break your joints. Let's see if the other one will work a little better. Oh, that is a tight joint. So I'll hit that with the hair dryer later. But he does have double jointed knees. And then he has a boot cuts. The boot rotates all the way around. He does have a thigh cut, which I forgot to mention. Thigh rotates all the way around. He can do the splits, no problem. So that's nice. And then he's got rocker ankles, so that ankle can point down about that far, point up about that far, and then the ankle kind of rotates all the way around, but it bumped into the holster a little bit there. So let's go ahead and, since we've got this alternate head, pop that off and pop that on. That's a tight bit. Doesn't quite want to go on all the way. And once I get it on there, it's still really tight. But again, this is a head that's more sculpted to look like the vintage He-Man toy head. So if you want him to be a He-Man that's a little more consistent with the vintage line, well, there you go. So personally, though, I always liked the mullet. I always thought that was a good look for him. Dolph Lundgren probably would have looked kind of silly with that page boy haircut. The mullet looked good on him, though. So let's go ahead and put that back. And yeah, I am a little disappointed again that he doesn't look more like Dolph Lundgren, but you know, gotta take the good with the bad, I guess. So this is a really cool figure, and it would be greatly improved if it had a better likeness to the actor, but unfortunately this is just what we got. But you know, if you can replace this head in any way and get something that's like a little more accurate, you know, that's an option. So I might try to 3D print him another head later on and see if I can get something that's a little more Dolphy, shall we say. But I'm pretty happy with how this figure turned out for the most part. I never thought I would get a movie He-Man figure because for years there was all those rights issues and Mattel said it was impossible to do. So I was just kind of like, oh well, I guess it's impossible to do. Oh, I didn't talk about this on the cape. There's like this nice gold printing there. It looks really cool. So, but yeah, I was kind of resigned to never getting one, and then they were coming out with the was it Stroud was the guy's name? I think Brian Froud was the guy who did Dark Crystal. I think William Stroud. William Stroud, that's his name. I got it. Okay, I knew I'd get it eventually. But yeah, the I wasn't able to get those, so I was really disappointed that I wasn't able to get those, and I figured they would be cost prohibitive to get in the future. So I was really happy when I saw that Mattel was coming out with these, but of course then they sold out like instantly. So I wasn't able to get them at the time. But now I'm able to get He-Man, and he's really cool, and I'm really happy with him. And hopefully at some point I'll be able to get Skeletor. I really do want to have that Skeletor figure, because Skeletor is my favorite character. But I do love He-Man, and he turned out really cool. So that's pretty much it for this episode. Next episode, I'm going to go ahead and open up the new Battle Armor Skeletor. I've been looking forward to this one for a while. You know that this was one that I was saying, oh, I hope they make this. I hope they make this for the longest time, because I am a huge fan of Battle Armor Skeletor in general, and it looks like they did a great job with him. So I'm going to look forward to opening that up. Hopefully tomorrow. Hopefully I can get around to doing it tomorrow. So anyway, that's it for this episode. If you enjoyed it, please make sure you like and subscribe. All the fun YouTube stuff down below. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think about this figure and He-Man in general, specifically the movie version of He-Man, since you know it is the movie version of He-Man. What did you think of it? Did you enjoy the movie, or did you were you one of those kids who wished it was a little more like the like the Filmation cartoon? I think that the main problem with the movie, and I think most people would agree with me that the main problem with the movie is that they went to Earth, and it would have been a lot cooler to see more of Eternia in the movie. But I guess budget wouldn't let them do that, so that's unfortunate. But I still have a good deal of fondness for the for the old movie and go back and rewatch it from time to time. So that's pretty much it. We will talk to you next time. Bye.